Alright, I am back with another video, and today we've got a pretty interesting one. I wanted to make a monk build, mainly because you guys voted for it, with 40% of the votes going to monk on the poll that I put out last week. I might actually do that again this week, so keep an eye on the channel and the community page to see if I put up any more polls, or join the Discord where you'll get notified automatically. But I wanted to make, as silly as it sounds, a kind of dodge tank build inspired by Ultra Instinct from Dragon Ball. I know, anytime I start trying to do anime stuff in this game, it never ever goes well. But I really liked the idea of making a dodge tank. Someone who effectively draws in their opponents and, absorbs a lot of damage by just making the opponent's attacks miss. So I kind of like the idea of it being kind of a risk-reward system where you basically give yourself a really, really high chance to dodge, and if you dodge, great, you don't take any damage, you're taking some heat off of your opponents, it's pretty nice. But then of course, obviously, if you do get hit, I still want to be able to tank a little bit. We've got a decent pool of HP here, but not the best. But the idea is that you're just able to dodge over and over again, using various different methods to increase your AC and your chance and decrease your chance to get hit, to just be able to mitigate damage that way. And as such, by taking the Ultra Instinct inspiration, or just the Dragon Ball inspiration in general, I get to throw in a few extra goodies, like Ki Blasts and other such things, or like fast movement and teleportation, which really does make for a fun and interesting build that can position itself around the battlefield, do various different attacks with different elements, like Radiant, Force, or that sort of thing, Fire, or even ranged bludgeoning attacks, which you'll find, which I found to be pretty cool in this build, and then also be able to just take on a huge amount of aggro and damage without really having to worry. And I will say, this build is definitely a double-edged sword. It gets a lot of stuff that makes it really fun and unique and honestly quite powerful, but that it does have some clear downsides, which I'll get into as the build goes on. Again, it is a risk-reward system. We will have a bit of a lower HP pool overall. We also will be missing out on a key monk feature that might make some encounters a bit more difficult. You have to plan a bit more rather than just go punch, punch, punch and not really think, which, some people might like. So, I don't know, we'll kind of see how this build goes as the video goes on, but let me know if you guys enjoy this sort of concept, and I might just do another poll soon, I think. I think I'll maybe let you guys vote on a caster for next week. So, let's get into the build. First off, we're playing a human. Nothing too crazy here. I think it's pretty obvious that with the Ultra Instinct inspiration, I decided to try and emulate Goku a little bit with the character design and failed completely, because this just does not look like a human being. This looks like a Barbie doll with an emo haircut, but we're going to go with it anyway. Being a human gets us access to Civil Militia, giving us some proficiencies that, I'll be honest, we're not really going to use, but the extra skill proficiency is nice, but otherwise, choose whatever race you like, it really doesn't matter. For our class today, we are going to be starting off as a monk, obviously. This is going to give us access to things like Flurry of Blows, which we will be using, Unarmed Defense, which honestly, by the time this build is done, you'll be able to sit around a 20 AC before any spells or buffs that you'll be using, which is really nice. We're going to gain access to Dexterous Attacks, allowing us to make Unarmed Strikes with our Dex. If you decide to go with Hail Giant Potions on this build, which are an option, you might not worry about that too much, but otherwise this is going to be a Dex-based monk. We've also got Death Strikes, making our Unarmed Strike stronger, as well as our bonus action Unarmed Strike. If we're not really using our bonus action for anything else, we can always make an extra attack, which honestly flows kind of nicely with this build. Moving on to our background, again, kind of going off the Goku inspiration here, we are going for Folk Hero, allowing us to gain inspiration for basically growing our legend and being a good guy. It also gives us 2 wisdom-based skills, which fit nicely within this build. And now we get to move on to the basic stats. Strength is at 8, we don't need it, but again, if you want to go for Tavern Brawler plus Strength Potions, you absolutely can, but I've decided not to do that today, just because I don't really like that playstyle in my playthrough, but if you want a power build and you want to go for that, you want to go through the extra effort, it would obviously make this build way stronger. Dexterity is at 16, it's our main attacking modifier for our melee attacks. Constitution is at 14, not too low, but so obviously giving us a somewhat decent HP pool to work with if we do end up taking a hit, but we'll have so many ways of mitigating our, our AC and our chance to be hit that it's not really going to be an issue, but a Constitution of 14 is going to sit just fine for this build. Intelligence is at 12. We actually are going to want some intelligence on this build, and I'll speak more on that a bit later. And finally, Wisdom, obviously our main monk stat for helping out with our AC, as well as alongside our Dex, as well as a bit of our monk abilities that we're going to be talking about later. And finally, Charisma is at 8. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like to make their tabs with like a dumped charisma stat, because obviously you're the face of the party in this game, and a lot of the kind of checks do kind of come up with a bit of a disadvantage if you have less charisma, so it is a shame to dump it, but honestly, we just don't need it in this build. Maybe you could throw this on a custom companion, or a hireling, or even like, you know, laezel or somebody. You could kind of figure out different ways to use this build. It doesn't have to be your main character, but I mean, that's up to you. Next up for our skill proficiencies here, I went for Perception with my human skill. We get Animal Handling and Survival from our background, and I've gone for Insight and Acrobatics for the rest. Feel free to change that up as you see fit. At Monk level 2, we're going to gain access to one of our first kind of dodge mitigation abilities, and that is Patient Defense. By spending a key point using our bonus action, we can make it so all attack rolls against us will have disadvantage, and you will have advantage on dexterity saving throws. Now, by the time this build is done, Patient Defense will not actually need to be used anymore, as we'll be getting both of those benefits completely passively. So, while it's good in the early game, you eventually will stop using it, and can spend that key point and bonus action on other things, but it is a good start. We also do get Step of the Wind, Dash, and Disengage, but honestly, we're not really going to use those too much. Now, at Monk level 3, you're going to get to choose your subclass, and I would say I would recommend 2 for this playstyle, and it honestly depends on preference. The first one I recommend is the Way of the Drunken Master. Now, this may seem like an odd choice for this build, but it is actually specifically geared towards dodging and even reflecting attacks. Depending on if you want to drop a level out of our multiclassing options here, you could reach level 6 of Monk, which would get you access to Redirect Attack, which would feel very much in line with this build, and also our version of Flurry of Blows on this build gives us, on this class I should say, gives us the benefit of Disengage, so we can effectively dodge by just moving out the way without ever having to worry about getting hit, or having to spend an extra key point on Step of the Wind. So honestly, it does have some merit in this build, but when I actually wanted to kind of go for the feeling that I wanted with this build, Way of the Four Elements was actually the way to go. It gives us a little bit more resource management, giving it with Harmony of Fire and Water, allowing us to restore some ki every long rest, as well as we are going to be able to pick Disciples of the Element spells, which honestly, in my opinion, kind of fit the vibe of the build more than just focusing even more on our dodging. Because yes, Drunken Master could also give us a buff to our Armour class as well, with Life of the Party and such like that, technically giving us more AC, more chance to dodge, etc, etc. So feel free to go down that route if you want a less blaster version of this build, but I do think Way of the Four Elements just gives us some fun little bits of utility that we wouldn't be able to get our hands on otherwise. So really, it's a pick your favourite choice between those two. I used Way of Four Elements in my testing because it's been a while, I thought I'd give it a shot, and I found it to be a lot of fun. Namely, with our first spell choice here, the Fist of Unbroken Air. Now, this is because in the Dragon Ball Super anime, as well as in the video games, Ultra Instinct Goku is known to have an ability where he literally just punches with a condensed blast of air at range, so Fist of Unbroken Air quite literally makes sense. It does 3d10 bludgeoning damage and has a chance to knock an enemy back and knock it prone as well, barring they fail a strength save. Honestly, very fun ability, feels very in line with the build and just feels cool to use. For your second one, I would recommend Fist of the Four Thunders, just to push characters away from you if you still want to disengage without actually taking the disengage action. This does cost 2 key points and it is a con save, so it will drop off a little bit in the late game, but otherwise it still feels very in line with being a powerful kind of blaster character. And then finally, your last one is up to you. Fist of the Fire Snake can give you a ranged fire damage attack. Sphere of Elemental Balance, it just gives you a big range of elements to use, which is honestly probably the most useful option here. Brush at the Gale Spirits, Water Whip, just pick whatever feels fun to you. At Monk level 4, you're going to gain access to Slow Fall, which is whatever, but you also do get to choose your first feat of the build. And as such, I would say at this point we are going to want to bump up our Wisdom first, which may seem a bit weird, but it is going to fuel our 4 element stuff, and it's also going to fuel some stuff that we're going to get in a couple of levels from now, so really, it's entirely up to you if you want to go with Dexterity or Wisdom first, either or, depends what you're focusing on more, but I do think grabbing Wisdom first is going to work out just fine for us. And finally, at Monk level 5, we're going to gain access to Extra Attack. Extra attack basically just is going to be a big damage boost for the build, which is why I kind of wanted to push for it as early as possible. And Stunning Strike is also going to be really useful for attacking our opponent's pressure points and making sure we deal as much damage as we can. And also, another great way to mitigate damage is making it so your enemy can't even do their action in the first place. So, overall, I think rushing for this level does make sense. However, for the multi-classes that I'm about to talk about, you can try to throw them in pretty much anywhere in those first 5 levels, because Monk does get an extra attack through its bonus action regardless, so you're not going to feel too far behind in terms of martial prowess, but I definitely do think you want to focus on getting at least a good solid few levels in Monk first before you start multiclassing. Really, you're going to have to play around with the leveling scheme and see what feels best to you, because from here on out, we're not doing any more multiclassing. We're not going to do any more levels in Monk, sorry. And this is where that starts to become an issue, because you see at level 6 of Monk, we get key empowered strikes, which means that our unarmed strikes will overcome resistance to physical damage. So things like steel watches, which have resistance to bludgeoning damage, would be able to resist most of our offensive melee attacks, which is a bit of a problem. This doesn't come up that much though, and I feel like it's okay to drop it for this build, in the kind of sense that I do want to grab some other stuff a bit more. Otherwise, feel free to kind of leave this one behind if you so desire, or pick it up. You can take the 6th level of Monk and just guarantee that you're going to be able to hit most things. You would also get another choice from your 4 element spells, as well as extra Monk features if you went for Drunken Monk as well, like redirect attack. So really, it's up to you if you want to go from this. But there wasn't really anything here that I explicitly wanted from level 6 of 4 elements, so I've decided to go for our first multi-class instead. Our first multi-class option is actually going to be Cleric. Now, Cleric makes sense for a few reasons. Obviously, it's wisdom based, so it synergizes with Monk, but we're also going to be able to grab a ton of benefits depending on what subclass we choose. Now, and I think you guys already know what I'm going to be going for, but let's just see what we're going to get from this first. First up, we're going to gain access to our cantrips, which really, take anything you like. Guidance is useful in a lot of situations, might help out with that whole party face thing, but we're also going to be able to grab things like Sacred Flame and Produce Flame, giving us a ranged fire attack and a ranged radiant damage attack. Now we're starting to throw out some key blasts. We also get to choose our subclass, and in this case I am going to be going with Light Domain, because we are going to gain access to Warding Flare. You can use a reaction to impose disadvantage on any attacker that goes to attack you. So if you don't already have disadvantage through some means, at this stage in the game you can gain access to Warding Flare to basically stop yourself from having to use patient defense a lot. Obviously you can only do this once per turn because you only have one reaction, but I still think it works out pretty well, especially for the other things that we can get from this Cleric dip. However, I could definitely see the Cleric dip being removed if you find that once you get to the end game and you have more passive abilities that are going to basically give a similar effect, you don't really need Warding Flare anymore. There are some other things that I like to have from Cleric that personally would make me want to keep it in my playthrough, but I think a lot of people might also decide to just drop the Cleric level entirely once they get to a certain point in the game, that being maybe like mid to late Act 3. So feel free to spec this one out if you want at some point in your playthrough, but let me just make my case for it first. We get to choose a deity, which I've decided to go for Tempest, the Lord of Battles, and since he is all about honourable combat and condemns needless bloodshed, felt great for a martial artist kind of religion. We also have skill proficiencies here, in which case you can kind of pick whatever you like. You can actually grab Persuasion here, which I think is what I'm going to grab, just so we have at least something. And finally, spells. This is where it gets interesting. So first off, Guiding Bolt. Obvious choice, big radiant damage key blast. Can't go without it. The next attack roll against the target will have advantage. Feels just as it's a great part of our kit that works for range. The next one, however, though, is Command, and this is quite an interesting one. Command can make us force an enemy to move towards us. This is one of our aggro pulls. This is how we make it so that enemies actually do attack us, rather than just running to someone with much less AC. So this is definitely a fun way to kind of goad a creature into attacking us, and kind of makes sense on this build in my opinion. We can also pick up Sanctuary to enter a complete state of dodge, meaning that we absolutely cannot be hit if we choose to. This is pure Ultra Instinct. This is where we decide we are not going to get hit, we are going to focus entirely on dodging before going on the offense. So if you need a turn where you just have to be safe and apply some buffs, then this is a really important thing to have in your back pocket. As well as you can pick up, if you don't have a decent concentration option, which at this point you don't really, you can grab Shield of Faith just to give you even more AC. And then finally, for your last Cleric spell, it's really up to you. Kind of pick whatever you like here. Maybe a quick heal might work, or something like Bless. Really, it's entirely up to you. Now, for the rest of this build, we are going to go for a third class. But the question is, what are we going to go for? Initially, whoops, I conceived of Swashbuckler Rogue, because it just has a lot of things going for it that could help us, and honestly, that is another build unto itself. Definitely got to do a Way of Shadow Swashbuckler Rogue at some point. I think that would be very, very fun. However, today we're going with Wizard. Now, hear me out. Wizard provides so much utility to this build that I was not expecting, and let me show you exactly what that is. First up, we get to choose some cantrips. Ultimately, not a lot of these are going to be useful as our intelligence is not at its highest. The only reason we even have any intelligence in this build is because I want to be able to slot in more wizard spells, but we're only going to be using them for utility. So let's grab Friends, Mage Hand, and Minor Illusion for now. Actually, instead of Minor Illusion, Blade Ward, just in case you really do need to tank. Now, moving on to our level 1 spell selection. First up, obviously, is Shield. As a reaction, give yourself 5 AC. If all else fails, this usually won't. The highest AC I achieved in this build when I was doing my testing, with Shield included, was 32. Most things in the game are not hitting that. So hopefully, this will be your kind of backup. If everything else fails, you can still Shield. However, you also want to pick up Magic Missile, a guaranteed to hit range damage force attack. Doesn't need intelligence at all because the damage is always fixed and can scale up with the spell slots that we used. This is just another powerful ranged Ki Blast attack that we always have access to, which feels great. The rest is utility spells. Enhanced Sleep, Long Strider, Featherfall, and even Expeditious Retreat can be useful in some situations, so have these in your back pocket. But for now, bring Shield and Magic Missile. At Wizard level 2, we get to choose our subclass, and of course we're going to be going with Divination. Divination is one of the best ways to guarantee a dodge in this game, using the Portent Die. Each long rest you're going to gain 2 Portent Die, and during the day, you can use a reaction to change the die roll of any attack roll or saving throw roll near you to one of the Portent Dice. So in my testing footage that you would have seen in this video, you will notice that I had 3 Portent Die. One was a 19, one was a 5, and one was a 3. Obviously, the low numbers can be put on an enemy's attack roll, guaranteeing that they miss you, which is huge. The only kind of downside to this is that we only get to do it guaranteed twice per long rest, but thanks to an ability we'll be getting later, we'll be able to do it a bit more consistently per day. But again, this is like the backup option. Like, if all else fails, you drop a Portent Die to make sure you're guaranteed not to get hit. And I know people always complain about like the reaction box popping up all the time, but with Portent, it's actually coded a little bit better so that it only pops up if it would actively make a difference, which is quite nice. Now, we do get to pick a couple more spells. False Life could be a good way to give yourself some extra HP if you're feeling a little bit squishy. And then for the last one, I mean, find Familiar, who doesn't want to have a little pet? And then finally, you can kind of choose whatever you like for this third slot. I'll go with Enhanced Sleep for a bit more maneuverability. At Wizard level 3, you're going to gain access to level 2 spells, and these are going to be pretty damn useful. First up is Blur, allowing us to make it so that attackers will have disadvantage on attack rolls against us, which is pretty damn good. Obviously this costs our concentration, but if we're not getting hit in the first place, that doesn't really matter. So we just get to spend our concentration to basically gain disadvantage on any attack rolls against us, similar to Patient Defense, which is okay. Not the best, but it's okay. Obviously makes sense for the build, so we'll take it for now. But if you're taking your wizard levels this late, you might already have some of the passive options of doing this, so maybe Blur isn't a great option for you, but you can train it out later if you like. We're also going to be grabbing Mirror Image. We can cast this before a combat encounter to make it so that our armor class increases by 9, basically kind of giving us 3 free hits, which is pretty good. We can also choose a bunch of other stuff here, but I'll come back to that in a little bit. So yeah, that's that level. At Wizard level 4, we're going to get to choose another cantrip. Again, we kind of already have them all, so, I mean, it's a pick your favourite. We also have access to more level 2 spells. I'm going to recommend grabbing Misty Step to allow us to teleport around the arena, very, very Dragon Ball, and also position yourself for ranged attacks or getting back up close if you need to. And then, this is a bit of a weird pick, but I do feel like it makes sense for the build. See Invisibility will allow you to see invisible creatures around you, tapping into that state of Ultra Instinct where you don't even really need to see, your body moves on reaction. And then finally, just slot in what you need to. Now, for your feat for this level, we definitely want to bump up that dexterity or that wisdom, depending on what you did first. So yeah, that is that level. At Wizard level 5, we're going to gain access to level 3 spells. My first spell of choice is going to be Haste. Obviously, this increases our armor class, makes us even faster, it gives us a second action, allowing us to weave both spellcasting and martial combat a lot easier. And again, it's concentration, but if we aren't getting hit, then that doesn't matter as much. So yes, we have a lower concentration, and yes, if for some reason our concentration does break, like for example we're knocked prone, that could be pretty damn deadly for us, and that is one of the kind of big kind of risk-reward systems of this build, but it does make a lot of sense. Second off, Lightning Bolt. Because it's a Kamehameha, that's basically the best way I could describe it to you. Yes, Sunbeam is technically more accurate, but we're not getting that in this build. Lightning Bolt is the next best thing, so you kind of have to have it. But yeah, we're going to throw Haste in here, and we'll take off Blur and throw in Lightning Bolt. And finally, at Wizard level 6, you're going to gain access to Expert Divination. You now gain 3 Portent Die per long rest, and whenever you take a short rest, you'll receive a Prophecy, so a vision of the future. It basically gives you a small little side objective that if you complete it, you will regain a missing Portent Die, so you get another one. So this kind of gives you a bit more fuel for the fire every long rest or so. Basically, it's more dodging. We're also going to gain access to more level 3 spells. I would take Counterspell, because again, one of the best ways to dodge a big blast of fireball is just to stop it from happening entirely. We are pretty reaction heavy, so this might not go off too much, but feel free to keep it in your kit if necessary. And finally, I also do like Slow as a counterpart to Haste, allowing you to target multiple creatures that are going against you rather than just targeting yourself for a buff, reducing their AC and making it so that they can only use 1 attack per turn, and they can't use that action and their bonus action, because one of the best ways to mitigate damage is preventing your opponents from being able to attack in the first place, or at least attack as frequently, so Slow feels pretty good. It also gives you the class fantasy of that you're moving so fast that everything else around you is slowed down, which, you know, kind of fits what we're going for here. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a pretty diverse character. You've got a lot of melee offense, you've got a lot of ranged magical offense, and you've got a ton of defensive options. Like, you basically have the ability to dodge, disengage. You can do pretty much anything to just position yourself anywhere you want in the battlefield, and blast or punch your way through pretty much everything, and basically avoiding every single attack you're going to take. Obviously, AoE effects and saving throws could be a bit of an issue, but we have high wisdom and decent intelligence, so the worst of the saving throws are kind of covered. And obviously, we will have the ability to dodge things pretty consistently, so, you know, could be pretty good. But however, I will take this opportunity now to talk about the downsides of this build. First off, the leveling scheme. I said that basically you can kind of take the levels in any order you like, although I do kind of like pushing some of the monk levels first at least until you get your subclass. But really you can take the cleric dip or the wizard levels starting from any point, because again, you do have that bonus action attack, and I do feel like you kind of want to focus on diversifying your kit quite a bit as well, rather than relying on just punching. If I wasn't pushing for extra attack in this build, I would probably go for 3 levels of monk, maybe 2 levels of wizard, go for the cleric dip, finish off monk, finish off wizard. That's basically kind of how I would do it, but really you guys just need to play around with the leveling scheme, and even I can admit it is quite an awkward leveling scheme. You're not really going to be feeling as powerful maybe around the mid game, but once you get to but in the early game you'll feel pretty good, and in the late game you'll feel pretty damn good. So overall, you're just going to have to plan it out in a way that feels right for you. And also, resources. While we have a decent chunk of spell slots, if we're spamming our ranged magic attacks or having to constantly reapply buffs, those are going to go down pretty quickly. Same with our key points. While our key points do recover on a long rest, we only have 6 per combat, just as with our normal abilities, which can obviously get used up pretty quick if you're pretty high on the offensive, with things like Flurry of Blows and things like your Way of the 4 Elements spells. So those are kind of a downside to this build, the leveling scheme and the resource management. Otherwise, everything else feels pretty damn good. So you'll have to kind of decide, pick and choose how you want to play this build, but otherwise it does come out really nice in the wash when everything is said and done, and the equipment makes it even better. So let's talk about that, because there's quite a lot going on here. We have no melee or ranged weapons here, not really for this build, because, well, we don't really need any. We kind of want to focus on punching and using our spells more than anything else. However, I do want to quickly point out as an aside, in the late game, if you're playing a race that gets rapier proficiency, you may do a bit better if you pick up the duelist prerogative. Now, obviously, normally for the character that we're making here, they want to use a sword, but the duelist prerogative would give you a lot of things. 2 reactions, which obviously really helps this build, I don't think I need to explain why, as well as challenge to a duel, which forces enemies to attack you. Again, don't think I really need to explain why that's good. We didn't get rapier proficiency as part of this build, so I decided not to include it here, but I thought I'd just mention it as kind of an honourable mention for the build, if you want to take things a little bit further in the late game. And again, no ranged weapons here either, but obviously things like the Darkfire Shortbow are always good if you want to fill that slot with something. But anyways, let's talk about the equipment that we do have. First off, you've got a couple of choices for the headgear, but I've gone for the Mask of Soul Perception, giving us a +2 bonus to attack rolls, which helps offset the fact that our dexterity isn't maxed out. We also have a +2 to our initiative rolls and perception checks. All of these feel very in line with Ultra Instinct. Again, we're highly perceptive and we move on instinct, meaning that we're not likely to get jumped, hence the high initiative, as well as the high perception checks. I also kind of like the idea that this build has almost sort of a psychic element to it with detect thoughts, like maybe the reason we have this kind of like psychic reactive power is because we are infected with the tadpole. I don't know, you could kind of go with that if you like. This is kind of the more utility option that kind of helps the flow of the build a bit, but if you want more power, grab the Scabby Pugilist Circuit. If you're going to be surrounded by a bunch of enemies because you pulled aggro, you might as well deal an additional 2 damage with every attack you make. But also, in the early game, there's the Haste Helm. There wasn't really anything else to really recommend for the early game, as monks don't really get a lot of good headpieces in the early game, so the Haste Helm to just give you more movement speed to get you where you need to go before you're able to teleport just worked out alright. Now, for the late game, you can grab the Cloak of Displacement. At the beginning of the wearer's turn, the cloak activates, effectively giving you the effect of Blur, the Blur spell that we talked about earlier, which lasts until you gain damage. So, basically, until you get a hit, you basically have patient defense up, which is awesome. This helps the build so bloody much, I cannot even begin to tell you. It really helps out in Act 3. We get to save key points on patient defense. We get to save spell slots on Blur. It just does so much for us. Hell, it even means we get to save our reaction from using Warding Flare, which is, again, maybe why people might want to drop the Cleric level. But if you do end up taking a hit, having those other options as backup is still really good for enemies that multi-attack, for example. But if you've got a super high AC and disadvantage to hit you, this pretty much is going to just be the best option all around anyway. Moving on to the Vest of Soul Rejuvenation. I know this is pretty much the bog standard for a lot of late game monks, but it just works so well for this build. Whenever you succeed a saving throw against a spell, you'll regain a bit of HP, not really relevant here. However, a +2 to armor class, allowing us to land on that nice and solid 20, as well as any time someone misses you, you can spend a reaction to punch them. This is another reason why I steered away from Drunken Monk, because we effectively get its redirect attack ability here without having to spend the additional key point. So overall, this feels pretty damn nice to have, and is personally what I would go for in the endgame. In the early game though, you can get a more active version of this, which basically lets you do the same thing, except it's only when you actually have Patient Defense active. However, since you're going to be using Patient Defense quite a lot in the early game, and you get this right away in Act 1, it just kind of made sense to use this one until you get this one. So maybe you have to more actively focus on using Ultra Instinct in the early game, but in the late game it becomes way more passive, it just becomes a natural extension of yourself. Makes sense, right? Now, the handpiece, the gloves, the armwear, this is where it starts to get tricky. So, there are a lot of options here. All of them make sense. So let's talk about them. First up, this is the Gauntlet of the Tyrant. Normally, this would look a bit different in your game. The mod that I use to add the equipment to my inventory is a bit outdated. Really, I should change it. I'm just too lazy. But basically, what this would normally do is allow all of your unarmed strikes to deal an extra 1d4 of force damage and give you a +1 bonus to your spell save DC. That still happens. However, what the description here is missing is that it also gives you access to a level 3 version of the command spell once per long rest, which I've already explained why command is useful for this build, so you can see why I might go with this. This is probably the most easily accessible late game option because you get it from Gortish, which you're going to be doing anyway. So it just felt like it fit nicely on this build, giving our attacks a bit of extra force damage and also having that command, and also the spell save DC buff for things like our Way of the Four Elements stuff and such like that. Although I'm not sure if that actually like interacts properly. I don't know, Four Element spells are a bit weird. But let's go over some of the other options. First off, your early game option, the Braces of Defense, giving you a +2 bonus to your armor class. This is just going to help you dodge in the early game. Then, you could also instead grab the Fork Lightning Fingers, changing that force damage to lightning damage, but also giving you a usage of a level 3 Lightning Bolt once per long rest. Again, another Kamehameha is never going to go wrong. There's also the Thunder Palm Strikers, changing that damage to Thunder and giving you another usage of a level 3 Thunder Wave once per long rest. Probably not as bad, probably not as good, but Thunder damage is less often resisted, so in my opinion, might be good. Now, this next option I'm only going to talk about because somebody else is going to mention it if I don't, but there's a reason I never normally include these. So, the Gloves of Soul Catching. Your unarmed attacks will deal an additional 1d10 force damage, and once per turn on an unarmed hit, you regain a flat 10 HP. Alternatively, you may forego the healing to gain advantage on attack rolls and saving throws until the end of your next turn, and a +2 to Constitution. I don't need to tell you why these are good. Really, do I? I mean, look at it. That is stupid. However, these are so stupidly good for a reason, and this is the reason I never include them in my builds, because by the time you get these, you're done with the game. There's not much of a reason to include these in the build when you get them for beating the game's hardest fight, the super boss of the game. Spoilers, 3, 2, 1, Raphael, right? Not only do you have to beat Raphael, you also have to get these from Hope, which means she has to survive the fight. And it's, at that point, it's not worth it, man. Like, you've beaten the game. There's no point in me saying, oh yeah, in order to make this build, you need to beat the super boss of the game. That's what the build is for in the first place, is to beat all the fights, not needing to beat the fight to finish the build. It's, yeah, you get my point though, right? But it's a hell of a nice reward. Definitely what I would recommend if you do go and beat that boss. But otherwise, yeah. People tell me I should include these in my builds, and I'm just like, no, there's no point, because you're done the game. Rant over. Moving on, the boots of choice are the Acrobat boots. Basically, this just gives you advantage on dexterity saving throw checks all the time, so you get the other half of patient defense without needing to use patient defense. So now we have the disadvantage on attack rolls and the advantage on dex saves passively at all times, meaning that things like Fireball are less likely to do the full damage against us, which is nice. Moving on to the Sentient Amulet. This is going to help us with that low-key kind of resource pool that we have, allowing us to restore a number of key points equal to our martial arts die once per long rest, even in the middle of combat, which is nice. So combining this with Harmony and Fire and Water and the short rest that we have, you are still going to have plenty of key points for the day. But also, it's going to give us access to Shatter at level 2 once per long rest, so it's just another blast. Really, this is just here to help patch up our kind of resource management. Really, you can throw anything in this slot. Moving on to the Ring of Free Action. I always kind of think that people forget, like, when you're making a dodge build, it's not just about dodging active attacks, it's also about, you know, being able to not be held down and restrained. So giving us the Ring of Free Action here means that we can ignore difficult terrain and cannot be paralyzed or restrained. It basically just lets us be as free as the wind. And finally, the Eversight Ring. We're Ultra Instinct. We don't care. We're never ever going to be blinded, because even if we can't use our eyes, we can use our senses and our active perception. Basically, this just gives us blind fighting, which is something I feel like this type of build would have. But again, you can swap this out if you want to. Finally, for the fashion, we are, as always, using Fear Taylor's Camp Clothing mod. For the monk clothes, mixed with the leather boots too, coloured in the vanilla pale orange dye to give us this blue and orange look. But yes, that is the build, and overall, I've pretty much said my piece on it. It's a fun build, it's a cool build, it's a build that will give you a fun and unique playstyle, and in the moment, it just feels so fun to just push the button and watch your character do all these things and dance through the fight, the combat without taking any damage. It's fun, but it does come with those downsides, and those downsides are kind of big. So really, you do have to just actively think and manage your resources a bit, and you really do have to plan your build accordingly based on what items you're grabbing when, what levels you're taking when. You just really do have to think a little bit more, but hey, people might like that in a playthrough. So yeah, I'll admit this build is a little dodgy, Just going to sit on that one for a bit. But it does work. It's fun, and I really, really like it, and I think it will fulfill a class fantasy for a lot of people. However, willing to revisit a similar concept again. I keep thinking about that Way of Shadow Swashbuckler build now. Kinda want to do that. So Psychic Barbarian, Swashbuckler Way of Shadow, 2 builds in the pipeline. Okay. So I'll put up a poll to vote for next week's build, what class is going to be prominently featured here out of the casters. So we'll see how we go with that. Right, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.